Hey everyone, my name is Lior, and I am joined here by Dr. Desiree Yazdan. Did I say that right?
Yes, yes, yeah.
And we connected a few weeks back. We were introduced through some mutual friends, and just through our conversation, I found that it just seems like we have so much in common. We're both practicing dentists. We kind of do completely different things in the space in terms of trying to create value for other dentists and, dental practice owners that are looking to either level up their game or run a more sophisticated business. And just through our conversation, I learned so much about kind of the course or the coaching that you do, which I thought is really fascinating. And then not to mention, I mean, I think you've kind of done probably one of the things that's the hardest to do and something that so many dentists aspire to do, which is you run a super successful fee-for-service office where you don't really deal with insurances. And I think that, instead of just going around and promoting our products, I think just kind of maybe talking through that and hearing more about your story would be awesome. So here we are, just wanted to kind of chat and keep it super casual and just see where the conversation goes. So I wrote a bunch of questions. I'm just going to grill you. No, I'm joking. We just kind of talk through it and just have some fun. So um so yeah, so thanks everyone for chiming in. My first question. So your journey. I think that I always talk about my journey. I had this like super crazy start. I got out of dental school, didn't know anyone in the dental industry, really couldn't find a job. And then I left dentistry for a while and then I came back to dentistry and so on. But would love for you to just kind of introduce yourself and just talk a little bit about your journey, like your early days of practicing. When did you graduate? How did you get started? What inspired you to kind of follow this path?
Yeah, so I graduated in 2012 and I knew I wanted to do high-end cosmetic dentistry and I knew that I eventually wanted to have my own practice, but I also knew I knew nothing about business, like nothing. And I mean, I'd never had a business. I obviously like you don't learn that in dental school. So I um I was introduced to somebody who had a super successful business. And I had the opportunity to be the associate at the practice. I kind of like weaseled my way in, but more importantly, like what I really wanted to do was just like really learn. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to be an associate for a period of time and try to learn as much as I can. But I have to say, being an associate, you still don't learn like the things that you really need to learn for practice ownership. But my long story short, is I ended up being an associate at a bunch of practices. And I was working at a different practice every day of the week. I worked 6 days a week. And I knew it wasn't sustainable, but I just wanted to like see what was out there. And the practice that I liked was doing a lot of high-end cosmetic dentistry. So I really wanted to learn and all of that. And I was introduced to this person by a very credible source. Long story short, I ended up buying into the practice, becoming a partner, um, realizing like within 6 to 7 months later, she sold me that half of the practice, knowing that she was going to lose her license.
Oh,
And
wow.
so, yeah, so that is a whole nother situation. But thinking about like now my experience, like I'm so different in business. But so I went from being an associate to owning part of one of literally the most successful practices probably on the West Coast. And maybe even at the time, like probably one of the most successful practices like in the country, to having nothing, like literally overnight had no income, no patients coming in, just like huge bills that I had no money to pay for. And I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? So I rebuilt my practice from what felt like a nuclear bomb exploding in my practice. So it wasn't your normal thing. And so talk about not knowing
Wow.
anything about business. I think I spent like the first year just trying to survive that. And I was like, if I could survive for 1 year, then I could make it. And then the second year, I was like, okay, I survived. Like, could I thrive? I don't know. So that's when I really started learning about like systems and marketing. And I started reading about marketing and researching things and learning about the psychology of selling treatment. And especially because I knew I wanted to have a fee for service practice. And that's very hard to do in today's world because everybody, including patients, are so insurance driven. And I just wanted to do really good high-end quality work. And I'm not saying insurance offices don't offer that. I know a ton of doctors who have
Totally.
insurance-based offices and they give wonderful care. But I just knew I wanted to be fee for service. And so I'm actually very proud of like building that.
It
But
is a huge, huge achievement. And you touched on so many points. I'm really trying not to interrupt you because I have so many questions. I have so many things that I wanted to follow up on. But I think you hit on something really interesting, which is, we come out of dental school, we know maybe a little bit on how to practice dentistry, but we really just don't know jack shit about running a business. It is just a blank slate. And so, and you talked about like you joined a really successful practice and you shadowed that doctor. Um, do you have any formal business training? Did you like take any business?
zero, like so bad that when the practice went under, I went to my neighbor who had a practice there for like, I don't know, 40 years, 30 something years. And I was like, okay, so like, I know I'm probably supposed to be looking at numbers. What numbers should I look at in the practice? Like, I knew nothing. Like, that's how little I knew. I didn't even know like production, collection. I mean, I knew that and knew patient, but there was
Basic.
like very little that I knew, so much that I was like asking somebody else, like, okay, so what should I be like tracking? I should probably be tracking something. I didn't even know. That's like how little I knew.
Amazing. So then you talked about how you kind of self-taught yourself
Mhm.
business, like marketing. What was that process like? Like I can relate just so just to kind of chime in on that. Like I also have zero formal business training. And when I temporarily left dentistry, I kind of just jumped, head first into something I had no clue about. And I was able to pick up as many books as I possibly could. And back in the day, there were still bookstores. You would go to bookstores, pick up business books, read blogs online. I mean, I just anything and everything to get just get my head set, but also understand what are best practices, what are people doing, looking at the other players in the industry. But I think that that's just such a unique approach. Like so many people want a formal education. I think it's really great for people to hear that it's totally doable without that. But what was like, how did you go about that?
Yeah, I mean, it was a struggle, but I felt like the blogs that I was looking up online were very general and very vague. I think it was like a good starting point. And then I like would read books and try to learn, but there wasn't like right now, I feel like there's so much more information out there. There's podcasts, there's like coaching programs. There was zero coaching programs when I needed the help. There was nothing. And I looked, I was like, can someone help me? I found one consultant and I was like, okay, maybe I could learn something from there. But it wasn't like a formal, like, do this and do that and do this. It was more just like we would get together and then it was like little tips here and there. And I wanted structure. I wanted to know, like, what is the best thing to do to like get a patient to call the office? And then once they call, what's the best thing to do? Like, I didn't even know anything, right? But I was like, how can I convert them? What's the experience should be like? What do we say in a financial case presentation? How should we word it? Should we have third-party financing or not? And which one? Like, I wanted like a structure and there was like nothing that I could find. I have a couple friends that are super, super successful in business. They're older. And so I kind of would just like reach out to them and be like, hey, can I just like meet up with you and like learn some stuff about business and whatever. And they were so generous with their time. And so like one of them I would meet like once a month for coffee for like 20, 30 minutes. And he would tell me, okay, like work on this, do that. And then in combination with like reading books, my dad is also very smart, but my dad was like, just take care of the patients and patients will come. I'm like, Dad, there are no patients. Like, I love you, but there are no patients. He's like, eventually they'll come. I'm like, I'm running out of time and money. Like, we need them now.
So
But
when this kind of nuclear bomb hit, you didn't like switch to insurances. You just stuck on the course. So, I'm guessing it was a difficult first year. Um,
Really.
what
Yeah.
were the most important things that you did to get patients through the door?
So I don't know if you know this, but I have a nice social media following. And so
You have a massive, it's like, I was checking today, it's like 275,000.
yeah, like something like that. And then I started an Instagram account for that reason. So I was like, well, I don't have money to market. So at the time, the marketing avenues were like magazines, TV, a spread in the magazine was like $10,000. I didn't have $10,000 to market. I couldn't get on TV. So I was like, well, social media is free. So what can I do with that? So
Yeah.
I started posting, I just committed to posting every single day. And then over the course of a year, I learned like what to do, what not to do, how to get patients in. I mean, it took me like a year to get a patient in. Now I understand
So
more
social media was the main driver for new
outlets.
patients.
Mhm.
And I'll caveat that with today it's just everyone has a social media, and dentists are, you got dancing dentists, singing dentists, there's so many different approaches people have taken.
Yoga,
Yoga
handstands.
dentists, yeah, there's
Like,
everything, but
yeah.
it's gotten pretty saturated. I mean, it's hard to kind of stand out. If you were, and just off the cuff, if you were doing it today, what would you do? Would you still go to the social media route? Do you still think that there's
I
enough?
would 100% go to the social media route because you don't need like even if you have let's say 200 people following you, if all 200 of those people are potential patients and they want your treatment, like that's great. You know, if 200 people showed up at my office this month, I'd be like, hurrah, like we did it, you know? So
Right, right, right.
I think people see my social following and they're like, oh my God. Like, and for me, it's like I did it out of like, I needed it. Like it was like such a struggle. And so for me, it's not like, "Ooh, I have so many followers." It's like, oh, like if you only knew the reason why I have that, like it was out of desperation. So yeah.
Amazing. So as these patients started to come in, um, you know, I guess we talked about it. Well, we should talk about a few different things. How do you attract the right type of patient, right? If you're trying to change your mindset from, insurance based to fee for service, high end cosmetic work, how do you attract those patients? What are the strategies that you use?
That's a great question. So I always think like your mind has to become that before you do. So when I was like, okay, I do high-end cosmetic dentistry without any patients in my office, right? It starts with the mind first. It's kind of like, I don't know, you look very fit, but I had to lose baby weight. So like when I was losing baby weight, I had to think of like, well, what was a thinner version of me like? And I had to become that person again, right? Like the thin version of me naturally is like, I'm not counting my calories. I'm not thinking about food all the time or my next meal or like whatever. I'm just kind of like living and eating healthy naturally. And so when I became that person again in my mind, like my body followed. Of course, like I was exercising and dieting and eating healthy, but that's what I was doing before. So,
I'm gonna just say one thing there. I also had to lose baby weight because when my wife was pregnant, I was eating with her nonstop. And when our daughter was born, we both had to lose weight. And I actually just started wearing my Invisalign retainers all day long to stop it.
oh, that
That was
too.
like I just wake up in the morning.
Like 7 pound weight loss within.
Exactly. Just I call it the Invisalign diet. So yeah, I didn't mean to take you off course, but
Oh, it's perfect. Yeah, so like in my mind, I had to be like sold and I knew I already had the skills because I had done a lot of cases within the practice I was at. And I was like, okay, I have this skill. And so I just started getting savvy. Like a couple people I knew reached out to me and I was like, hey, like I'll just do them for cost. Can I take your pictures? And can I use your pictures on my website? And can I post them in my office? And like so I started doing that, but I became that way in my mind first. And I used a small group of people that I had to do their teeth and use their pictures and create like, well, at the time there was kind of no video to create. It wasn't a thing. There was no video on Instagram. So it was just photos. But I took photos and I had professional photo shoots and all of those things. And just to have something to promote, just to have like some before and afters to show people the work that I could do. And so that's like, I became that in my mind first. And then I was like seeking that, like, okay, if I was doing really high-end cosmetic work, how would I talk about it? If I was doing it all the time, like, what else would I be doing? Right. And then every time I would do a case, I'd be like, analyze the pictures and like, how could it be better? Like what, and then I would look at like other cases. And at the time it wasn't on social media. I was looking at other cases. I was looking at like things online and like in books and stuff. I'm like, okay, how can I make it look better? I was analyzing like the models and the teeth and all of that. So just always trying to get better at what I was doing.
Amazing. So, I'm taking notes here because I'm learning as you talk, but it sounds like the most important thing is mindset. And mindset was like the one thing that really, when you created that change, that's like when you started operating a specific way and everything was framed from that perspective. Like, how do I attract the right patients? And how do I market to them? And somewhat of it came out of necessity, but you just built a business around it, which I think is just phenomenal. So now that you got patients coming in, and we talked a little bit about this, SOPs, standard operating procedures, running your business, case presentation, talking about money, the do's and don'ts. I think these are things that you coach a lot of people on. And, my company, the Dental Lab, tries to build software that helps facilitate some of these things. But I'm really, really interested in you maybe talking more about that. Like, you're kind of self-taught in business. You were able to bring people through the door. You figured out your marketing. How did you build the business around it? And I know sometimes it feels like you're building an airplane mid-flight. So I can totally relate to the chaos, the chaos of like building a business. But tell us more about that.
Yeah. So I love your company because what you do really supports practices and you have to know your numbers to track. So for example, so I say everything is a system, every single thing, even like doing an exam, you might think like as a dentist, oh, I'm just doing an exam. No, but that's a system because if you've ever had an associate, you have associates that can produce and you have associates that you're constantly having to fill their schedules because they don't know how to fill their own schedule. And so
Totally.
I look at like treatment planning and case acceptance as a system, even like as a human, right? At 10 a.m., everybody needs everything. By 3 p.m., I'm like, oh, you know what? We're going to watch everything, right? So like, or it depends on how you feel. So like,
Yeah.
if you want to be consistent and do what's best for not just your business, but like for the patient, you have to have a system. At what point do I treatment plan this? At what point, like, does the patient need the crown replaced? Like, all of that. And then you have to track your case acceptance rate. So like what software like yours does, right? It's like it helps you track, okay, offered these patients this amount of treatment. How many of the patients said yes? And if you're not at least at a minimum of 80% of that, you need to work on your case acceptance. So then it's like another, what is a system? Well, what is the patient experience like? Who's preheating the patients for you? Anybody? Or is it just like, are you the only person talking to the patient about it? What is the follow-up system like, right? So all of those are systems. And then even like your software, helps with like, okay, I don't know exactly all the ins and outs, but it's like, okay, well, you made this many patients accepted treatment. These ones didn't. You follow up with those and you could see with the follow-ups, how many converted, right? So I remember when I implemented a follow-up system in my practice, they're like, I feel like we're hounding the patients. I'm like, no, like the cavity is going to get worse. It's not going to fix itself, So
This
like,
is music to my ears, and I want to talk a little bit more about this. But before we jump into that, I actually wanted to rewind a little bit back because you touched on some really interesting things. Okay, let's pretend I'm a patient. I call your office. I saw your social media post. I see this insane case that you posted. I call your office. Hey, my name is X. I'm interested in becoming a patient. What happens? What are the standard operating procedures in your business
yeah.
that have led you to this point?
So my girls in the front are very well trained in answering the phones. I do typically send most new patient calls to one person, but anyone answering the phone should be able to handle new patient calls. So that is a system.
Okay.
What you see on the phone, like how it's answered, is super important. It's just like um, I don't know, I'm sure you've been to like, a nice hotel or something where you have a nice experience, and no matter who you speak to at the hotel, it feels like it's the same experience. And so I want everything in my practice, no matter who you're talking to or who you're getting treatment with, to feel like it's the same quality of experience, right? So that's a system, answering the phone like the proper way, asking the patient for their name, getting specific information from the patient, like how did they hear about us? And then just being very valuable, answering their questions. But a lot of people, if you've ever listened to phone calls, which I do a lot with my clients, it's like they're just answering questions like, oh, do you guys, how much is it for a cleaning? Oh, we charge whatever. A pro fee is 155. Okay, do you have any openings? Yeah, we have openings next week, right? Like there's no, like if you want the conversation
They're doing the basics.
to get booked, you have to ask the questions, right? Oh, when was your last dental cleaning? Oh, we have an opening tomorrow. Would you like to take that appointment? Right. And so it's like, just that is a system. Like the whole thing is a system. You have to train the team on that. So let's say they're like, they book the patient, they come in, like it's also on the phone, a system of like, hey, by the way, you're going to get a text from our system to fill out your paperwork. Please fill it out within 48 hours and blah, 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 right? Everything's a system, right? So when the patient comes, they're not having to fill out their paperwork in the office. And then, we have like, when they come in, we have like a warm welcome. I usually try to tell the team, like, try to make it possible, this patient's coming in and you spoke to them on the phone. You be the one to greet them. Hi, welcome to our practice. We're excited to have you here. We have everything prepared for you, blah, blah, blah. Let's get you back. We've already reviewed your paperwork, right? Like the experience should be good. So all of those things are systems within the practice. Then transitioning from the front office to the back office, or from the back, like to the doctor, right? Like all of those things, like there should be a place where we're edifying the doctor of like, oh, you're seeing Dr. So-and-so for your cosmetic treatment. She's great. Our patients love her. Like those little things and building rapport and having those little communications like actually make a big difference in the patient experience.
Absolutely. I
Um,
mean, let's be real. Nobody likes to visit the dentist, right? So it's a
I
matter
don't
of,
like being in
and
the
you know,
chair too.
no, totally. And I'll be honest with you, like in my office, I obsess over how patients experience our office. Everything from the lighting to same thing, how we answer the phones and appointments starting on time. Like I am such a stickler for on time.
Yeah.
Appointments starting on time, office being spotless, office smelling good and clean, floors, not having shit
Yeah. Like
on
a
the
dirty
floor.
cotton roll or
Yeah,
impression
or even just
seal.
hair, sometimes
Yeah.
you walk in, you see
So
hair
gross.
or dust, it's like the worst. But just being extremely deliberate and obsessive about how people experience it. And then finally they make it into your chair. And you said something that I also talk a little, and again, we talk about this is why I thought this would be such a great conversation, because we talk about similar things from different perspectives, right? I always talk about how the first moment where you're sitting chairside, that's your brand, right? And you have to have a specific set of steps that you follow to walk patients through to help them understand their treatment, the why behind their treatment. And if you take that approach, you can drastically increase your treatment plan or case acceptance, right? And so, like, what we do is we have a standardized protocol. It's a guided patient exam. We've built software around it, and this is one of the really unique and cool features in what I do. But it's interesting because, like, we've just met a few weeks ago. We have completely different experiences, but yet we have a lot of shared things that we do, and it's just a way that we figured out how to make things work. I mean, you have a system to walk a patient through from the beginning to the end, helping them understand, and you do it in a standardized way. And I actually don't know if you have associates or not, but it sounds like if you have a protocol and everybody has to follow it, and that's such an important way to get patients to accept treatment. And I think it's really important, it's an important step. Like whenever I have a new associate so I have 4 GPs in my office, and I've spent a lot of time deliberately training them, like, this is how we do things here. Whatever you learned, great. You can maybe incorporate some elements of it, personalize it, make it your own, but this is how we do things. And this is what we walk through. And we want to make sure that we're thorough, we're detailed, we don't miss things. And it starts from record keeping to communications, to conversations, to explaining treatment and so on. But walk me through a little bit of that. So I've made it past the people in the front.
Yeah.
You know, everyone's super warm. I've come into this beautiful operatory. You finally walk, or what happens next? What's that program?
So what you said there about like that when you sit down, those first few moments are your brand. I totally agree with that. I really believe that people buy from people they know, like, and trust.
Totally.
And people know within, like, I think I read a study that was like 7 seconds or something, whether or not they're going to buy from you. And so they're not just
Blink. Have
getting,
you read the book Blink?
no.
It's I think that's what it's called, but it's a great, I'll double check and I'll get you the name. But
Okay.
it's a great book about how um we essentially determine what we want. It's subconscious and it happens instantly. It's like with
Right. So you're right. That moment is super important. And so, you have to build that rapport with patients, and it doesn't take a long time to do, but that is really important because, again, they buy from what they know, like, people they know, like, and trust. Like, you're not just getting Invisalign, you're not just buying veneers, like, you're getting it from somebody you know, like, and trust. And so, very welcoming. We're always trying to build a connection. And personally, like, that's the fun part of my day, is like building a connection with a patient. And I love the dentistry too. Like, all the other stuff is not my favorite. I don't actually like managing any people or doing anything other than doing the dentistry and making connections with the patients. And so my goal is always to make sure my patients know that I care a lot and that we will do really, really good work. And so everything that I'm explaining to them, it's laced with, like, I really care about the work that I do, and I really care about the work I'm going to do for you. And if I'm telling you something, it's because I think you're going to benefit from it and you're really going to need it. Or like, I think it's the best option for you. It's not just because I always think I'm really into business, but there's a time and place to be into the business and the numbers, and there's a time and place to take care of the patient. So, like, when I'm in the room with the patient, I'm not thinking about the business bank account and our production and our numbers. I'm just there for the patient.
Just being present. Totally.
Yeah, and I think most of us are like that. I mean, I had a patient today who was like, I think I want 10 veneers. I was like, your teeth are pretty. Don't let anybody ever drill on your teeth. Like, I'm not going to do it, but somebody will. Don't let anybody do it. They're perfect, exactly the way they are. And so, like, I mean, nobody really sees that except the people in my office, right? Like, I don't post about that, but I think just that experience just from the get-go is super important. And then the workflow. So you said something about the guided exam.
Mm-hmm.
Really intrigued by that. But the workflow of, like, doing an exam, I think it's so impersonal to, like, lay somebody back and go straight into their mouth and start yelling out a bunch of, like, ML number 3, like, composite, or just numbers 3, 5, 3, 2, 2, 4, whatever, like BOP. It's so off-putting to the patient. And so,
Yeah. So interestingly, in my office, every new patient walks in, they typically get a CT, bite wings, PAs. So instead of a full FMX, we'll do bite wings, PAs, a CT. If we see anything suspicious in the CT, or if my staff sees anything suspicious, they're trained to take additional PAs, intraoral scan, and intraoral photos. And before I even walk in the room, I've usually spent some time reviewing all of that and come up with, like, a soft plan. Like, sometimes you walk in and, like, everything looks pretty good, all right, we just chart. Sometimes I'll take a look at things and, there's maybe a failing root canal or a bombed out tooth or wisdom teeth that look really dangerous. And I'll start grabbing some screenshots from the CT and start, kind of putting my thoughts together even before I walk into the room. And so, I'll still walk through my guided exam. And, I'm in Silicon Valley, you're in Orange County. So we're in both, like, very affluent super intelligent areas, right? Like most of my patients they
They
work
have
in
a
tech,
high dental IQ.
super high dental IQ.
Yeah.
And we use some AI to kind of read the X-ray. We have every toy in tech under the sun. But I will literally step into the room and obviously, build the rapport, spend the time explaining things, and I'll walk patients through the X-rays. Like, hey, when you look at the left side of the screen, it's the right side of the mouth. Here are the layers of the teeth. That's what we're looking for. This is what you see. And really try to take the time to explain things to them, the why behind the treatment, and then what happens if they don't do it and what their options are and so on, right? And I always find it so interesting that I would say 5 out of 10, probably 50% of patients say, nobody's ever explained this to me. And it's crazy. It'll be like I had a patient come in yesterday and just cracked root canal tooth. And I'm looking at the wear facets and the patterns of biting and so on. And he's got this crazy overbite. And I said to him, hey, like, has anyone ever talked to you about your bite? I mean, that's how I approach the subject. I don't say, hey, you kind of have a jacked up bite. I always say, hey, has anyone spent the time explaining this? Because some people have had people talk to them about it and they just don't care. They don't, they're not motivated to do it, whatever it is. But we start talking and I say, hey, like you have this really significant overbite, and that really starts to explain. And, I have my typodonts and I explain how teeth are supposed to function and biting patterns and so on. And I'm always so surprised that nobody takes the time to explain these things, right? And you're pitching whatever, whether it's a full mouth rehabilitation, 10 veneers, or even Invisalign or an implant, you're talking about thousands of dollars of treatment, right? When have you gone to purchase thousands of dollars worth of treatment, whether insurance is a factor or not? It's thousands of dollars, and people just don't, like, when is the last time you had an experience when no one takes the time to explain it to you and you actually purchase, right? And so I think going back to what you really talk a lot about is treatment plan acceptance and explaining things to the patients. And I think a lot of doctors actually make the mistake that they completely depend on their staff, right? They say, oh, my treatment plan coordinator will explain this shit to you and then you figure it out and blah, blah, blah. But they seem to misunderstand the most important component, which is you taking the time to explain to the patient the why behind it. When they get to the treatment plan coordinator, they should already be motivated
Yes.
and ready
Yeah. It's
to
just
move
like
forward. And it's just the
how do you want to pay for it? Like, do you
exactly,
want to save
exactly.
money and pay up front? Do you want a treatment plan? Like, what is your, right? I do believe in the team helping to, oh, like, I notice you have a lot of wear on your teeth. I'm going to bring this to the doctor's attention.
Totally.
Like those types of things, or you have like a really big silver filling in this tooth. And usually when doctor sees that, he or she recommends X, Y, and Z. So I'm just going to bring it to her or his attention, right? So I do believe in that for sure. But I think I remember I was in this like program for a while. It was like coaching program for myself. And I remember they were talking about doing doctor exams like for 5 minutes, like the doctor should only be in the room for 5 minutes for an exam because your team does everything. And I was like, that probably works for a lot of offices. That doesn't go well in mine. Like I probably spend a lot more time than I should in rooms with patients, but I have a 93% case acceptance rate. So 9 out of 10 patients coming into my practice, at 9 out of 10 patients I offer treatment to say yes to treatment.
I'm going to just say one thing. I don't think there's any office that can afford a situation where the doctor doesn't take that kind of time, right?
I agree.
Because even if you're doing PPO or HMO or anything under the sun, if you're seeing a patient, at the end of the day, it's a human interaction. We are emotional beings, and dentistry is already so traumatic for so many people that if you want to be successful in whatever the format is, you have to be personable. You have to take the time. You have to care. If you don't, you're in the wrong profession. Find a different job. I really genuinely feel that.
Same. And you have to be like excited about what you can offer. So I like teach about this concept of like treatment desirability. It's like how much somebody, including yourself, like desires a treatment. Like if I'm to talk to you about like this hair clip, I could just be like, oh yeah, like it's cool. It holds my
Yeah.
hair, whatever. Right. But if I'm like, oh my God, this is the best hair clip, you got to get this for your wife. Like
Yeah.
you know, the way I talk about it,
Yes,
if you want it or not.
totally. So great. Now patients, I mean, I think we're walking through all that. You said something that also, again, we've never talked about this before, but you said something that resonates so much with me, so much so that I've literally, again, I went out and I built software to help facilitate these things. Like I feel one of the biggest missed opportunities for offices, offices say, oh, I'm slow, I need new patients. It's always new patient, new patient, new patients. But we see thousands of patients over our career, and so few offices have a follow-up system,
Yep.
right? And I think there is this notion that if you follow up, well, I think it goes even one step before that. As dentists, because we are so untrained when it comes to business, there are some seminars out there that if you want to do like dental business seminar, it's a lot of these sales boot camps. So, they teach you how to be just aggressive on the phones, and it just makes you feel really sleazy, right? And I think there's this concept that like if you are a sophisticated or if you're a good business person, then you're doing shady things, but it doesn't have to be that way, right? Like if
Right.
you are kind of like what you said, you have a high level of ethics and standards. A patient comes in, they got beautiful teeth, and you say to them, hey, you really don't need veneers. Like I'm not drilling on your teeth. You shouldn't do it. If someone tells you to do it, run for your life. That's a very high level of ethics, right? If you treatment plan that way and you sleep well at night, knowing that you're recommending things that patients really do need, then having a system where your staff follows up shouldn't feel bad at all. It should very much be like, hey, you're just continuing to do your job. And I feel like so many offices miss this opportunity. A lot of times I'll talk to offices and they either don't have a system, have a sloppy system, or don't know how to create a system, right? And this is such a missed opportunity because you're probably sitting, I kid you, I mean, I've seen it firsthand, offices that we onboard and they're sitting on like hundreds of thousands of dollars of treatment of patients that have been in their office in the last 18 months, right? So recent patients, not like from 5, 10 years ago, that need treatment and nobody follows up with them or they don't have a system to follow up with them. So like in my office, we eat our own dog food. We use the dental lab, but we have a built-in CRM where you can like search for patients based on when they were last in and how active they are, if they have balances and what treatments they have outstanding, and if they're past due for hygiene. And then we have these ways where these dashboards where you can use to follow up with the patients, and the system tracks all the communication. So whether it's front office person one or front office person two or the doctor, anyone can log in and see who's been reached out to, what the
Yeah.
patient has said. And look, you do get patients that say, hey, leave me alone. I'm not interested. I left your office. I
And
moved
it's
away,
not
whatever
that,
it is.
it's not that many. Like everyone thinks,
No,
oh, if you follow
totally.
up more than 2 times,
Yes,
you're
exactly. Exactly.
harassing them. And
So
I'm
I
like,
think that's an important point. But another really important point is what I've seen working with hundreds of offices is that big ticket items typically require multiple touch points before they move. It's maybe 10% of people, at least this is my experience, maybe yours is different, but people come in, a lot of times they want to get more information, but then they have to think about it, and then you have to remind them, and then it's maybe 2, 3 months down the line, they finally say, hey, you know what? I've thought about it. I've done my research. I'm ready to give you $20,000 to fix my teeth or whatever, whatever the total is. But it's not this instant like, hey, I walk in, here's 20 grand, drill me, you know?
yeah. I would say like the thing that comes to mind is Invisalign, because nobody's going to get their teeth clean and thinking that they're going to walk out with a $5,000 or $6,000 bill for Invisalign, right? So I'm always like, for Invisalign, I'm always like, that first consult is really planting the seed, right? And you
Totally.
have to water that seed and create like some urgency in the process. Like sometimes we tell patients like, hey, you will keep your scan current for the next 2 weeks. After that, if you want to get Invisalign, you'll have to come in and we'll have to rescan you because
Yep.
whatever, like we want to create some urgency behind it,
Sure.
right? We don't want them to call 6 months later and be like, all right, I'm ready for it. Like their teeth may have shifted. We don't know. So, I think you're dead on about that. Like patients don't necessarily, they're not prepped to pay large lump sums, but that's why you need the follow-up system. And having software like yours that's able to help the team members track it and like help with the patient communications makes life so easy, because before software like yours, that's like printing lists and then manually doing Excel sheets
Yep.
and writing on
Yep.
the paper. Like nobody wants to do that.
No, but I think it's so important to understand when you reach out, when you create outflow, it might not be instant, but there's always going to be inflow. It's like energy, right? Like you put energy out there, you follow up with enough people. Some are going to say no, a lot are going to say yes, but you got to do it. And you have to have a business process and a SOP around it, right? I think that's just so, and again, I think this is why when we first talked, I'm like, oh my God, you literally everything you coach about also is this kind of stuff. And that's what I'm also trying to bring to the market just from a different perspective. Anyways, I have a few follow-up questions that are a little unrelated to that. One is I would love for you to tell me and everyone a little bit more about your coaching program because um, you know, there's a lot of offices out there where maybe they're kind of where you were when you were starting. They're trying to figure it out. They're trying to move away from insurance, or maybe they're still in insurance and they just want to do better, get higher treatment plan acceptance. You have this amazing program. I am really interested in doing it myself just to learn, but tell us a little bit more about this coaching program.
Yeah, so it's called $1 Million Mentorship, but I'm moving it over to systems for $1 million practice just because it makes more sense. But basically, I work with a dentist for a 6-month period. It's a group program, so like we meet on a Zoom every week in a group setting, and then there's a lot of one-to-one support through like messaging and I teach them all the systems that
So you
they
give them systems that you use in your office.
need. Yeah. And I always tell them like copy the system I give you and then make it your own because
So it's like how to train your staff to answer the phones and how to present treatment and
the financial case presentation, the like how to get case acceptance. And I always believe like I can tell everybody how to do every single thing and give a script, but the most important thing is the mindset behind it. So I teach the mindset behind that, the psychology of selling, the systems within the practice, like every single thing that they would need. And then I love it because it's very personalized. So like somebody might come to the call and be like, I'm hiring an associate or I need to hire an associate. I mean, I've had clients go from, you know, like $400,000 mark and now they're like at 2 million and they're like, I'm like, okay, you need to get an associate. And they're like, how do I get to having an associate? Like, what do I do? Right. And it's like, I have all the resources to be like, oh, like do this. Here's how you onboard them. Here's how you whatever. Like, so there's a system for everything. And that's really what I'm teaching. And then, I really like to personalize it to each person in the program. Whatever they need help with, they get the opportunity to ask and I help them. I mean, I had somebody just the other day was like, our case acceptance for Invisalign sucks. I'm like, okay. So we talked through the whole thing and changed the entire protocol. And I've done this for people and they go, like, I've had, people have like no case acceptance for Invisalign. And then like a month later, they're like, oh my God, we sold 8 cases this month. And like, we've never done that.
wow.
And like, that's a big win for them. And then it's like, it continues, but it's like just getting the right systems in place makes a huge difference. So
Totally.
that's really what I teach. And, again, I care about their growth.
Amazing.
So
Amazing. I think more, there's this goes back to what we talked about. There's such a big gaping hole in terms of having the right resources to help practice owners become better business operators in ethical and honest ways. And I think that what you're doing is super important. And I think anyone who wants to take the practice to the next level should definitely check it out. And we'll link that. A few last questions, and then I promise I'll let you go. I know it's late. Um, my first unrelated question, how do you overcome self-doubt and fear? I feel like so many times as practice owners, we're overwhelmed. We sometimes doubt ourselves in these moments. What words of encouragement, what suggestions would you give people in terms of like how you cope with that? We all face moments like that.
Yeah.
What do you do?
It's just a moment in time. I think, there's always good, there's always bad. And I try to focus more on my commitment to what my goal is rather than like a moment of disappointment. I mean, and if I'm disappointed about something like that happens, I'm like, okay, this is just part of the process. It's not the end all be all. I
That's what we
always,
call it, practicing, right?
yeah, right, right. And I think you have to really be okay with, honestly, I think this is the biggest deal, like being okay with disappointment and discouragement is part of the process of building a business and growing because it happens a lot. And the more you try to avoid that, the smaller you are. When you're open to feeling disappointed and discouraged, like just allowing that to happen, you learn more, right? You experience more. Like, you might have really high hopes for this Google ad campaign and you hired the whole thing and blah, 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 and you spent all this money. You're like, I'm going to get so many patients in my door. And then it doesn't work, right? Like, but what did you learn, right? That's more important. So,
Totally. So focus on the reality that it's just a moment, that we're practicing, we're always getting better.
yeah.
Um, and just, setting higher expectations, understand that you're always trying to learn. So I think those are really great tips. Okay, my next one. Um, what are your top three KPIs that you measure in your business? Like what were the most important things that every single morning you check? The ones that really you're constantly, how I describe it, it's like the pulse on your business.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna set aside production and collection because I think everybody's doing that. Um, so I would say reviews are super important. Um,
Awesome.
yeah, and then so there's leading indicators and lagging indicators within the business. I like to focus a lot on the leading indicators. So for example, maybe not how many, for example, Invisalign starts did we have, but how many Invisalign conversations did we have?
Okay. So this is a conversation. Do you do it with scans? Like how many scans you do or
No, like we actually like mark like who we
talk to about?
about Invisalign. And then we see like, does it go with our goal, right? And of course, as needed, right? If people don't need Invisalign, we're not offering it to them. But the problem is most of the time, if you're not aware of it, you're not thinking about it in the moment, you're not seeing what you should be seeing to help a patient get a healthier bite. So that's one of them. And let's see, I follow up calls.
From
Super.
your staff,
Hmm?
by your staff,
Yeah, follow-up calls by our staff.
like
Um,
the patients that have outstanding treatment, like how many people were followed up
yeah,
with?
so like if somebody came in and we spoke to them about treatment and they didn't schedule, like I want to see the follow-up calls for those.
Okay, amazing. So that's two.
That's more than two.
Well, we said the Invisalign or the Invisalign conversation.
Design,
We said
review.
follow-up calls. Oh, and reviews. That's right. I'll tell you about reviews. So I obsess about reputation management, right? And you probably have something similar, but every evening we get this automated message that goes out. Hey, how was your appointment? Rated 1 to 5. If it's less than 5, it asks for feedback. And then, but I monitor that religiously. And any situation where somebody leaves less than a 5, if it's a 4, I'm like, okay, whatever, maybe something was a little off. But if it's a 3, 2, or a 1, which rarely happens, I personally call the patient and try to understand what happened and try to course correct. And I think this is a really interesting thing that in my area, I dominate reviews. Like if you look at my practice in the area, we are ranked number one by reputation, but it's not because we solicit reviews. It's because we try to get ahead of problems before they happen, right? By the time you get somebody going online and blasting you, they're so pissed, but a lot of times they're pissed because no one's listening to them. Like they had a shitty cleaning or, sometimes it's petty stuff like, you know, whatever, they didn't floss my teeth or, whatever. And sometimes it just takes somebody to give them a call and say, hey, I hear you. I'm sorry. It's not up to our standard. Come back in. We'll fix it for you. We'll do it right or whatever it is. But I think that is, I didn't think about that, but that's probably one of the more important KPIs that I also personally track. So again, another thing there. Last question. What's your morning routine? Because I find that like the most successful people have a morning routine that you cannot mess with. Like I know I have mine, but I want to hear it.
Mine is awful. I have two little kids.
Okay.
And I'm very involved with them, and they're 5 and 2. And so my morning routine consists of me trying to get ready in peace, which never happens, trying to get them ready for school. I'm very big on like eating like clean food that's freshly made. So I'm always like making my morning routine is a disaster. I'm just trying to survive and keep my kids alive and happy and like make it out the door on time. Like that.
Amazing.
It's
Amazing.
not
That's a great routine too. There's nothing wrong with that, but
just, I used to have a great morning routine. I would get up, I would have like my perfect steak or a tea and my perfect meal. And I sometimes there was like a period of time where I would do the exercise thing in the morning. My kids wake up so early and they're ready to go. And I'm just like, oh my God, how am I going to make it to work today? So I am
amazing.
not one of those people. Maybe in like 5 years, I could go back to having like a decent morning routine.
Amazing. I mean, well, you know what? Listen, kids are an important part of our lives.
They are.
I have a kid too. I totally get it. And family's everything. I mean, that's what we do all this for. So that's a beautiful morning routine. And even more amazing that you're a working mom, you run your own business, you run your own coaching program, you're like a total boss. So uh, very humbled that you're willing to chat with me. And
I'm humbled. So thank you.
thanks again, and I hope everyone who's chiming in enjoys this. And then again, check out Dr. Yazdan's coaching program and the dental app if you want to learn more.
Thank you guys.